Sunday school leader, Christmas is over and the new year is here. And what a better time to have a lesson on the wise men, because we know that those wise men did not show up there in Bethlehem the night Jesus was born. All right, remember, we're in the unit that's entitled The Full Picture of Christmas. We're in that very last week of this unit, week 6, and we're looking at the wise men's worship out of Matthew chapter 2, verses 1 through 11. And the point of the lesson is Jesus is Lord and he deserves our worship. Have you ever noticed how just changing one word in a sentence just changes the entire meaning, even if you replace that word with a synonym? Let me give you an example. Guys, G-U-Y-S, guys, is another word for men. But we talk about the wise men and not the wise guys at Christmas, right? Ha, ha, ha. Anyway, all right, so how many of these wise men were there? Okay, our tradition says what? 3 wise men because of the 3 gifts. But, the Bible really doesn't say. It uses plurals like men and they. So we know that there are 2 or more guys involved here, 2 or more wise men. And as we look at our modern day nativities, we see that at least most of them that I've seen have the 3 guys are 3 different skin tones. We have a white guy, we have a guy with black skin, and we have a guy with brown skin. And most likely all 3 were brown skin because they were probably from what we know modern day as Iran or Iraq, Saudi Arabia, Yemen, somewhere in that area there. The 3 gifts that these wise men brought, they were from places east of Israel. They were common east of Israel in Arabia. So let me give you a little historical background about Herod. Herod, or Herod the Great, Herod the First, he was known for many great building projects in the land, even including the expansion of the temple. But he was a nasty guy. He ruled with an iron fist, very, very paranoid. He murdered his own wife, 3 sons, his daughter-in-law, 300 soldiers, and other relatives during his reign. Now, it was said it was better to be Herod's pig than to be one of his sons, which, looking then, I'd say that's probably true. Now, 5 days before his death, he ordered the death of his oldest son and also 2 leading rabbis and had them burned to death. And then it dawned on him, he was really ailing, failing in health, and he realized that when he died, nobody would mourn for him or mourn at the time of his death. And so he called for a group of notable Jewish people to be gathered up, and he brought them into this building, and he instructed his soldiers to execute them upon his death. That way there would be mourning at the time of his death. But fortunately, his sister reversed that order upon his death, and also ironically, Herod died during the Feast of Purim. So there was actually much rejoicing at the time of his death. First of all, due to the feast, the Jewish feast that was going on, probably also because those notable Jews were spared, and also maybe because he had died as well. So there was actually rejoicing going on at his death. So he was such a nasty guy, it's not a stretch that he would order the execution of those baby boys under the age of 2 in Bethlehem. We see that down in Matthew chapter 2, verse 16. Now, granted, that order of execution of those young boys, it's not recorded anywhere in any historical record that we have found yet. But let's remember this: Bethlehem's population about that time, it's been estimated to be anywhere from 300 to 1,000 people, so it's a pretty small place. The number of boys under the age of 2 during that time would have been, there again, it just depends on who you read, anywhere from, I've read 6 or 7 to 10 to as much as 30. And while even the murder of one child is horrendous, that small number of children that would have died in that small village probably wasn't as noteworthy as some of the other stunts that Herod pulled during his reign. Now, back in the time of about 40 or 39 BC, the Roman Senate appointed Herod. Now get this title. He was appointed as King of the Jews. Okay, so that's a title that he didn't want to give up. So when the Magi came to visit and asked Herod, "Where is this one who has been born King of the Jews?" This paranoid Herod was really threatened, and NIV says he was disturbed. So let's talk about that star for a minute. What was this star? It was this bright star. Was it just a star that we think of in the sky, just very bright? Was it a combination of planets that kind of converged together and it made the illusion of this big bright star? Well, based on Matthew chapter 2, verse 9, I'm going to tend to think that it was something just a little more supernatural than that. It talks about that the star rose and went ahead of them, and it stopped over the place where the child was, where Jesus was. So the star moved. It wasn't way up in the sky. It sounds like it was something that they followed and that it moved. So was this some kind of angelic event? Was this just a bright light that God made happen? I don't know. We don't know that, but we know that the Magi followed it, and they followed it for the 6 miles south of Jerusalem to their destination there in Bethlehem. Well, here's some points I think we should consider out of the lesson. Even when presented with evidence, not everyone's going to acknowledge Jesus as the Messiah. We see that with the chief priests. Herod turned to the chief priests and the teachers of the law and said, "Where's this child supposed to be born?" And they came back and reported, he's supposed to be born in Bethlehem. Here's some guys wanting to worship him. Why didn't the chief priests and the teachers of the law go with them? Why didn't Herod, repent and become a believer? Not everybody is going to believe. So Gentile astrologers were probably pretty low on the list of people whom the religious elite, Jewish religious elite of that day, who they would consider that would come and acknowledge or let alone worship their Messiah. Also, let's talk about the significance of those 3 gifts. You have gold, which would signify Jesus's royalty. Perhaps God provided this gold for a way for Mary, Joseph, and Jesus to finance their journey. It's about 90 miles from Bethlehem down to Egypt, to help finance that journey and for them to stay and to live until they could return after Herod's death. Frankincense might signify Jesus's deity. Now, how do we get frankincense? Well, they cut the bark of this particular tree, and that gooey resin that would come out, ooze out, they would scrape that off and it would dry, and then it would be burned as incense to God in worship. Frankincense. Now, what about myrrh? Myrrh might signify Jesus's humanity and his upcoming death, because that myrrh was used in the preparation of bodies for burial. So don't forget to pray for your class. I appreciate you guys and hope you have a great year.